The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
It's a good thing we're here all 5 days this week because there is just so much to talk about. Ebola panic is reaching new levels that even I am surprised by when it comes to what I would have expected to happen amongst corporate media and amongst bureaucracies and institutions. An elementary school teacher from Maine went to Texas and has been placed on administrative leave because of the Ebola situation. Now, you might say, well, David, what else did she do in Texas that made her such a risk in terms of contracting Ebola that she needed to be put on administrative leave? Absolutely nothing. She has been placed on administrative leave for 21 days. Of course, the incubation period of Ebola, we're very familiar with this by now. She was in Dallas merely to attend an educational conference. She didn't come in contact with anyone who had tested positive for Ebola and stayed in a hotel that was exactly 9.5 miles away from Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, where Thomas Duncan, the patient who died of Ebola there, had been treated. The school district said this is a response to parent concerns about the teacher transmitting Ebola to their children. Louis, I just don't even know what to make of this.
Paranoia. It's just textbook paranoia. And this is an extreme example of it.
And there are a few others. Middle school students were pulled out of school in Mississippi after the principal visited Zambia, which happens to be 3,000 miles from the Ebola outbreak in Africa. Michel Ducil, a photographer from the Washington Post, was disinvited by Syracuse University from participating in a journalism workshop. He went to Liberia weeks ago, developed no symptoms during the 21-day incubation period. He was disinvited, Louis. Does anyone realize how many people are going to die from the flu this flu season, many of whom would not die if they were to receive a flu shot? And we have teachers being suspended because they went to Texas, because they simply went to Texas.
Yep, it's unfortunate. But until this whole thing blows over, I think we're probably going to keep hearing stories like this.
President Obama announced the appointment of a new Ebola czar. The name of the individual is Ron Klain. Ron Klain's antecedents: lawyer, chief of staff to Vice President Al Gore, chief of staff to Vice President Joe Biden, registered lobbyist for Fannie Mae, helping them overcome regulatory issues. Read between the lines there, ladies and gentlemen. He has no federal agency experience. You could argue that this position of an Ebola czar is best for an administrator type rather than someone who has any science experience or medical experience. But even then, Ron Klain does not really have federal agency experience. What did the White House say about the fact that the new Obama Ebola czar has no experience with anything even remotely related to Ebola or running federal agencies? Quote, "We were looking for an implementation expert, not an Ebola expert." That seems clear because they certainly did not get an Ebola expert. And I guess the argument, Louis, is whether you need an Ebola expert or a so-called implementation expert. But even along the implementation lines, maybe he should have some experience with federal agencies or interagency type of administration. It doesn't seem to have that.
I think there's a good chance Obama does not even really know who this guy was, and that his advisors came up to him and just said, look, you need someone, and this is probably the guy for the job. And how were they influenced, to pick this guy? That's anyone's guess.
If you had to create an argument, and I'm not saying, Louis, that it's an argument you would feel is a really strong one, but if someone came to you, it was an academic exercise, argue that this is the right person for the job, what would you make up as your explanation?
What would I make up? I don't know. I have no idea. I'd have to think about it, because going over what we went over with this guy's credentials, it doesn't sound to me like he'd be the best person for the job.
He's a lobbyist, so he knows how government works. I mean, I don't know. I'm having a hard time even creating an openly weak argument for this guy.
Yeah. Let's start looking to see if he has any connections to pharmaceuticals or the healthcare industry.
Oh boy. Nate Silver has written a piece about why an Ebola flight ban wouldn't work. And I told you last week, ladies and gentlemen, look up the flights from the 3 affected countries to the U.S. and you will find that there are no direct flights. There is a direct flight from Ghana to the United States. There is a direct flight from Nigeria to the United States, but Ghana is not one of the involved countries. Nigeria had a dozen or 20 cases. They have now been declared Ebola free after something like 42 days without any cases of Ebola. And we really have the flights from West Africa going to Europe or the Middle East and then coming to the US. Do you realize, for example, how many flights go from London to the US each day? And yes, somebody could fly from West Africa, from one of these 3 countries, Sierra Leone, Guinea, or Liberia, to London, and then on to the US. If you want to eliminate that possibility altogether, you need to cancel, I don't even know how many flights from London. Just to JFK every day, there are a dozen or 15 or 20 flights nonstop between London and JFK. It is impossible, Lewis, and Nate Silver has explained the exact same reasoning as I used last week.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to make sense. We've heard other experts say it doesn't make sense. But you're not going to talk sense into people who aren't paying attention to the details and who are just scared, who are totally paranoid and are fearing for their lives, I guess.
The other proposal was, okay, forget about where the flight came from. If you have a passport from Liberia, Guinea, or Sierra Leone, you can't come into the country, which also doesn't really make sense because you're going to be focusing on the wrong issue. What's important is, were you there or were you in contact with someone who had the disease? These are truly non-starters that every medical expert is telling us would not resolve the problem and could even help to make the problem worse, number 1, by deploying resources in the wrong areas, and number 2, by providing a false sense of security and making people ignore what are really the factors we should be paying attention to.
Yep. But like I said, it's very hard to talk sense into people who are totally paranoid, and the paranoia is just rampant, it seems.
Ebola being used as an insult towards a West African soccer player. This story coming to us from Northampton, Pennsylvania. When I first read this, Lewis, I thought, when I read about Northampton High School, I said, did this happen at our alma mater in Northampton, Massachusetts? It just doesn't sound like something that would happen there. And indeed it didn't. This is from Northampton, Pennsylvania. 3 suburban high school soccer coaches are now out of a job after several students faced disciplinary action for chanting Ebola at a West African high school soccer player during a recent match. This is Nazareth area high school coach Edward Batchert and Northampton high school coach Craig Carvin, both who resigned after Nazareth player Ibrahim Tumkara was the victim of Ebola chants during a game that ended violently as a response to those chants. Tumkara was thrown out of the game for angrily charging towards at least one player after he had to endure these chants of Ebola throughout the entire game. Quote, there were tears coming down his eyes. He was visibly shaken by this, that it got to that level on the field. The coaches certainly should resign if they can't control their players, but let's not forget about all of the adults. How was this allowed to happen for an entire game?
I'm not sure. Perhaps the parents were at a distance. Maybe they couldn't really hear what was going on, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you just don't interfere with the game and you let it run its course.
Yeah.
But this is pretty stupid.
I was thinking, when we used to go to the Boston Celtics games years ago, Lewis, when Jason Kidd, I believe, played for the New Jersey Nets, now the Brooklyn Nets, there was an incident where he was accused and maybe even arrested for allegedly beating his wife, domestic violence. And whenever he would shoot free throws, the entire stadium would chant, wife beater, wife beater. And I started thinking, that was funny, not funny, but that seemed to be some kind of justice at the time, and it felt okay, whereas this clearly is wrong to us. And there's a huge difference, right? Jason Kidd as an adult, allegedly domestically attacking his wife, seems very different than chanting Ebola at a kid from West Africa, right? It seems like we're talking about drastically different circumstances, Or am I wrong? I mean, was it wrong for the stadium to chant wife beater at Jason Kidd?
I would say it was probably wrong for the stadium to be chanting that, but I will say that there is still a difference. He was arrested. There were allegations of this.
Not to mention that having a virus is not a crime.
That's true. And we have no reason to believe that this kid had the virus.
Of course.
Or ever had the virus. So it was just completely unnecessary.
Of course. Even our comparison is mostly in jest. It was just the idea of chanting something that's upsetting reminded me of those days at the time. What was it even called at the time? The Fleet Center? I don't remember what it was. The new Boston Garden, the building that replaced the Boston Garden. Drastically different scenario. Bears absolutely no comparison. Louie Gohmert, Republican congressman from Texas. I'm sad to say it, but I think the man is suffering from a very resistant case of Ebola, because he has now come up with the hypothesis that the infected nurses from Texas with Ebola are part of the Democrat plan, which is a war on female nurses. I don't even understand the hypothesis. Here's what he had to say to Glenn Beck on his radio show. Listen.
Welcome to the program. So glad that you are here. Louie Gohmert has joined us now. He's in Tyler, Texas. Hello, Congressman. How are you, sir?
As far as I know, I'm okay, but do we any of us really know for sure?
Well, if the CDC says you're not okay, then you're okay in my book.
Yeah, and it's a shame that the CDC had Frieden apparently is the new commander of the Democrats' war on women nurses, because good night, they set them up and then they throw them under the bus.
What is he talking about, Lewis? Is the claim from Louie Gohmert that the transmission of Ebola from a patient at Texas Health Presbyterian to two nurses was the result of some kind of staged transmission orchestrated by Democrats because they are targeting not all nurses, Lewis, but specifically female nurses? I mean, what is the former judge? Let that sink in, ladies and gentlemen. What is former Judge Louie Gohmert suggesting?
I think he might be suggesting that perhaps this was some type of poor funding, poor, implementation, education by Democrats, and that nurses are suffering because of it. Maybe something like that.
Well, the irony of that, Lewis, you know what it is? That these nurses contracted Ebola at a private hospital in Rick Perry's conservative paradise of Texas, and the blame is on Democrats, Louie?
And this is, well, we talk about it all the time, projection, right?
Yeah.
Republicans are the ones that actually seemingly have a war on women. And this is Louie Gohmert just trying to deflect and project it onto Democrats instead.
Subscribe to our Reddit discussion forum. Go to davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT. Excellent program for you today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show membership program is made possible in part by liberalbias.com. Liberalbias.com shows you how to unskew uncomfortable facts so that they'll fit nicely into your conservative worldview. Learn all of the latest ways to unskew reality at liberalbias.com. Today's new member of the day is Timmy Hager. Timmy Hager, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. The David Pakman Show membership program is what has allowed this show to expand from once every other week, think back to that, to 5 shows per week. You can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. Of course, you can also support our program if you do any Amazon.com shopping. Go to davidpakman.com and click on the Amazon banner on the right side of the page. You won't have to fill out any forms. You just click the banner and then shop. I recommend bookmarking the banner and using it whenever you shop. And Amazon sends us a little kickback. And a couple interesting things over the last few days. that our audience has purchased. A couple people, Louis, buying Gotham, the complete first season. This is the new TV show. It's kind of like a Batman prequel of sorts. I haven't seen it. I actually like Batman in general. Have you seen any of this show?
Not seen it. I haven't really heard anything about it, to be honest.
Yeah, I haven't heard whether it's good or isn't. You know, when I first moved to the U.S. back in 1989, I vividly remember we went and we got this small 20-inch tube TV and a VHS player, okay? And we went to the movie rental store, and the first movie we rented, I picked it out, was the 1989 Batman with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson and Kim Basinger. And to this day, I still really like that movie. It's been years since I've seen it, but that is really a very good Batman movie.
Yeah, classic. That was a big one for me growing up, too. I think a lot of the kids our age at the time just had a handful of movies they grew up with, and Batman, that was a big one.
Also, somebody using our Amazon link to buy the recent movie Snowpiercer. I watched Snowpiercer on a flight a couple of months ago. I was really looking forward to it because a bunch of people told me it was good. And it was good, but it really wasn't great. I don't know if you've seen it at this point, Louis. It does have this kind of representation of a class battle and moving from the back of the train to the front, quite literally in the movie. But it wasn't, it entertained me for 2 hours, but it really is not something I would watch again.
I still haven't seen it. I would like to, but I'm in no rush.
We have more information about TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a so-called trade agreement, which really is kind of just a pro-big business agreement. We have a leaked set of documents from WikiLeaks specifically on the intellectual property chapter. The intellectual property chapter is one of the chapters that for, I'd say close to a year now maybe, I've been telling you and telling anybody who will listen, is evidence of the disaster that TPP would be. And indeed, we have now learned from this draft, if it is an accurate draft, that it would indeed be an absolute pro-business, anti-consumer piece of legislation. Listen to this. In this new intellectual property draft of TPP, we see that there would be significantly stricter enforcement for patent and copyright law. There would be significant pushback in terms of strengthening patents, enforcement of patents, trademark, copyright sections. Ambassador Michael Froman, on behalf of the United States, is favoring binding obligations for 95 years of copyright protection for corporate entities. Damages for infringements of copyright would be based upon the suggested retail price of goods. This is so huge, and if you don't realize why, when there are damages awarded for copyright infringement, very often the damages are not based on the suggested retail price of goods. And as you and I know, Louis, oftentimes the suggested retail price is not the actual price paid at a retailer. And further than that, oftentimes when you have a copyright infringement, the damages are equal to, say, the recovery cost or the production costs, which are far lower than the suggested retail price. This is hugely pro-big business. Also, a 12-year of monopoly on data used to register biologic drugs and vaccines, expanding the scope of copyright protection for patent protection for pharmaceutical drugs, vaccines, and medical devices. That is not something that is going to be good for consumers. That is something that is going to be very good for big business. And this leak, Louis, confirming every single one of my worst suspicions regarding TPP.
It just gets uglier all the time. The entire thing is just to help big business. I'm not sure if we can stop it. I don't know what if it just seems like it's in the hands of Congress now, and if it supports big business, Congress is probably going to let it fly.
Well, even Congress is displeased that they're not that Congress wouldn't support big business, but even Congress is being mostly shut out of the negotiations. The next round is at the end of this month in Australia. This is the time to call your member of Congress. This is the time to activate. We need to stop the negotiations in secret. This is huge, huge, huge. I cannot overstate the importance of this enough. And much like net neutrality, it's not nearly discussed as much as it should be, instead of more superfluous issues that are not of the same significant long-term impact. People need to activate around this immediately. Very funny stuff from a debate in Florida with Rick Scott and Charlie Crist. Rick Scott, the current Republican Florida governor, asked a very simple question. I think you're really going to like this. Rick Scott was asked, quite simply, if you ban same-sex marriage, is that discrimination? Simple question, right, Lewis? Yes, I believe that banning same-sex marriage is discrimination. Or, no, I don't believe banning same-sex marriage is discrimination. Listen to this answer. This is the first attempt from Rick Scott.
You say you're against discrimination, but the courts have said Florida's ban on same-sex marriage is unconstitutional because it is discriminatory. Do you think the ban is discriminatory?
Well, let's think about where we are. None of us believe in discrimination.
Okay, let's stop it right there. None of us believe in discrimination. Even that's ambiguous. It's not an answer. We know that. But even that is ambiguous. None of us believe in discrimination in the sense that we want it, or none of us believe in discrimination in the sense that we don't even believe it exists. I don't know what he's talking about. Let's continue, see if we get an answer.
They clearly don't believe in any discrimination. In 2008, part of our democratic process, led by Charlie, there was a constitutional amendment passed that said marriage would be between a man and a woman. While I believe in traditional marriage, we've got to understand people have different views. It's going through the court system. My understanding is going to the directly to the Supreme Court. Whatever the Supreme Court decides, they'll decide what the law in Florida.
Okay, so bumble. I can barely even understand a word of what he's saying, but there's certainly no answer there. So then he's given another opportunity. He's told, you didn't really answer it. What exactly is your position on this? And he had the following to say, and then you'll actually hear Charlie Crist's response, and it's very clear. I'm understanding Charlie Crist's response.
Charlie is as governor.
Governor Scott, I'm not sure I got an answer to the question.
Sure.
I'm not sure I got an answer to the question. Do you believe the ban is discriminatory?
I don't believe in discrimination.
He's still, ladies and gentlemen, if anything we can be sure of, he does not believe in discrimination. Let's continue.
I can tell you, I don't believe in discrimination. I believe in traditional marriage. The court's going to decide. This is a decision for the courts, and they'll ultimately make the decision.
Governor Crist?
I don't believe in discrimination either, and I don't believe in it so much that I believe that gay couples should have the right to marry.
What a simple answer. Gay couples should have the right to marry. Is this an equivocation, Lewis? Because his donors probably are anti-gay, but at the same time, the tide is turning on this issue nationally and in Florida, and he has to kind of equivocate? Or does he just not want to answer for personal reasons?
The only reason he wouldn't want to answer is for political reasons. He wants to keep his job, right? That's the only reason. And I love this. It's important for moderators to push it and to try and get answers. The moderator here does a little bit, but I think she could have taken it further.
I think that this is just like when Bush lawyer John Yoo was asked by Congressman John Conyers, with regard to presidential powers, could the president order someone be buried alive? And John Yoo responded, I know the president, and the president would never order someone to be buried alive. It's the same type of non-answer, and it's a good thing that the panelists there at least made an attempt to get Rick Scott to answer. Rick Scott needs to be voted out as Republican governor of Florida. He needs to go, and we're going to keep covering that race as well as many others as we get close to the 2014 midterm elections. Next, I will be joined by a former pornographer. This will be a pretty interesting interview. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I'm joined today by Dave Pounder, who is a retired adult film producer, director, performer, also author of the book Obscene Thoughts, A Pornographer's Perspective on Sex, Love, and Dating. Dave, it's great to have you. You know, one thing I want to start with is we have a couple of these stories. One from 2011 where a Los Angeles traffic officer was fired for having appeared in a porn film. In 2013, there was this middle school science teacher, Stacey Halis, who was fired after appearing in a porn film. They had appeared in legal employment. They had not done anything that was against the law, yet they were fired. Let's start there. Was this something that people in the industry think of when they decide to participate in adult films?
You know, most people that come into the business are pretty young. Particularly the girls are probably 18 to 23, generally speaking. And I think most of them are pretty naive in life at that time. So they don't really think about the long-term implications of the decisions that they make more generally, not so much just in employment, but maybe in mate selection and other things that they do in life. Now, granted, you know, I was fully aware of that there would be sort of social consequences, if you will, for being involved with the adult film business, but I welcomed those challenges. You know, part of my decision to get into the adult film industry was to take someone like myself that has a perfectly, you know, legitimate background in the sense that I'm well educated, I have no criminal background, not involved with drugs, etc., to sort of challenge that social stigma and say, you know, there isn't anything wrong with sexuality. It's perfectly natural, you know, and people shouldn't be discriminated against merely because in one life, not just the adult film industry, but maybe they went to a swingers club with their partner, or maybe they were just a dancer, you know, or maybe they were a nude model for a painting class. You know, it really depends what people's definition of, you know, pornography is. You know, it's a very subjective decision. If you and your wife make a video and you don't distribute it, are you a pornographer? By some standards you are. By other standards you're not. What if you make a video and you put it up on the web on a server, but it never gets downloaded? Is the fact that you made it available for download enough to, you know, call you a pornographer and then, you know, have you dismissed from a job?
Well, there's those specifics with regard to what we could all agree kind of falls under that umbrella, but then there's even more gray area. I mean, what if someone were to be an actor in an R-rated movie that was particularly explicit, right? It pushed the boundaries of what would be allowed in terms of sexual content in an R-rated movie, or maybe it was NC-17, but in another country, it was the equivalent of R-rated. We're opening up this, and I hate to call slippery slopes when I don't think they exist, but we really are opening up a slippery slope here, aren't we?
Oh, absolutely. And to add to your list of analogies there is you think about somebody who has a non-sexual role in an adult film.
Right, or a technical role even.
Or say you're behind the scenes, you're a cameraman, or you know, you rented out your location to be used, and your employer says, hey, isn't that so-and-so's house? I was at the Christmas party last year. And they weren't even involved in the production. They left the house, they received income, legitimate legal income, reported it to the IRS, paid taxes, and now they're going to lose their job. There was a guy in Florida named Scott Janke. He was a town manager. He was employed by the city, and his wife, not him, but his wife had made an adult movie, and they fired him, not because he did anything unlawful, not that even his wife did anything unlawful, but just the mere fact that his wife was in the adult film industry as an actress and had made a few movies. That was grounds for terminating him from his publicly held position. Now, he wasn't elected, but he was an employee of a public entity. And the government, you know, they say that you have First Amendment protections to freedom of expression, freedom of speech, etc. Here you have these public institutions that are terminating people for perfectly lawful off-duty conduct.
Well, I was focusing on that when I was researching and kind of preparing to talk to you, which is, so we're talking about lawful activity. That's the primary thing. So then what really is it about the participation in the adult films that would cause a company to dismiss someone? And we're really talking about either offense or we're really talking about hang-ups and social stigmas, right? Because we've
Absolutely.
Eliminated the possibility that it's an illegal action. And
Correct.
If you think that down those lines, many people would be highly offended given the negative impact that the fossil fuels industry is having on our planet right now and on our society. About somebody working in that field, but we're really talking about the same type of arbitrary decision, right? You could be offended that somebody was working in an adult film in kind of the same way that you could be offended that somebody participated in the fossil fuels industry, which is having such a negative impact on society. And I think if we gave that example, people would realize how absurd this is.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the idea is think about somebody who works for, Anheuser-Busch, or I guess is InBev now, right?
Sure.
If I'm the owner of InBev and I'm creating alcoholic beverages, which some religions, like say Mormonism, have an opposition to drinking alcohol. It's immoral under their tenets of their law. Here's a guy that's creating a product that contributes to, kidney disease, or I'm sorry, liver disease, all the domestic violence that comes from that, DUIs, deaths on the highway. Nobody has ever died from an overdose of pornography. And morality is very subjective, right? Like for me, I'm an animal rights person. I think that hunting and killing another animal and taking away another life is immoral. Yet it's lawful. And as an employer, as a public employer, I shouldn't be able to fire someone just because they're a hunter. I mean, we live in the United States where this is supposed to be a society where we have the First Amendment not to protect speech that you enjoy. We don't need the First Amendment to say, I love you. We need the First Amendment to say, I hate you. And the thing is even though, I may have to tolerate hunters that violate my personal morality, but in exchange for my tolerance of hunting and this sort of abuse to animals, in my view, somebody else has to tolerate, their personal, moral objections to sexuality. I mean, if you look at Janet Jackson, right, she had the wardrobe malfunction at the Super Bowl, merely just exposed the breast. There was no sexuality, nothing. And it was a huge national news story about where is this country going, because we showed a perfectly natural breast, right? And there was Jimmy Kimmel did a spoof on that with Al Jazeera, and they had all these people in Iran dancing around in full burqas, and a sleeve falls off.
Right.
Forearm is exposed, and everybody freaks out, and Al Jazeera goes nuts, and the Americans laugh at that and go, wow, isn't that silly that they have to dress like that and cover a forearm? Meanwhile, the Europeans are looking at our Janet Jackson incident, where the Europeans have commercials of naked women showering topless for a shampoo commercial, and they look at us and think, look at those silly Americans. And the other interesting thing to look at is the societies that are more tolerant of sexuality actually have the best rights towards women. If you look at countries like the Netherlands or Western Europe or the Nordic countries, or even Canada, they have some of the best treatment between men and women, yet in most of these prostitution is legal, pornography is legal, etc. Where you look at societies where women's rights are not the best, access to abortion, etc., those have the most constrained constrictions on women's behavior, whether that's Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, or even here in the United States. Our women's rights here are less than they are in Canada and Western Europe, and you can see that our level of sort of sexual tolerance or even women's sexual empowerment is directly correlated with that level of freedom. So with
regard to the employment, though, just to get back on that, what we're really dealing with here in the U.S. is a situation where most people are employees at will, right? So no matter what our perception of, it's silly to fire someone because they worked for InBev, and that creates so many car accidents, or they worked in porn, very few people are in unions, and most people are just employees at will.
Sure. Now, you're talking about a private-public distinction. So in most states in the U.S., you can fire somebody merely because you don't like the color of their shirt. You can say, you're wearing a green shirt, you're fired. And the match to that is that an employee can quit for any reason or for no reason. What I'm trying to do is to apply this to the public employers, in the sense that to say, if everybody's paying taxes, right, the only beef that an employer can have as a public employer is someone who's doing something unlawful. Because everything else that's within the purview of the law should be acceptable to a public employer, since everyone has to pay taxes. If I work for Burger King, and they fire me because I was in the adult film industry, I can retaliate in the sense that I can stop consuming Burger King products. I can go to McDonald's or Wendy's. However, if, say, a school district or a city discriminates against you, right, you can't stop paying taxes. You can't say, I don't like the way the school board is operating. Let me stop paying taxes to the schools. I'm still mandated to pay taxes to the schools on the property values. Therefore, if I'm mandated to pay taxes and I have no option, regardless of how the school board is performing, then these public employers should not be permitted to fire people for the sort of the subjective moral choices that go against the public employer. Think of it like this. Let's say you're a principal of a school and you have two teachers. Say one of them, got a dog from a dog breeder over the weekend, and you think as an animal rights person that, that dog breeders are bad and people should adopt from shelters. If you're going to allow, say, public schools to arbitrarily fire teachers who had been in the adult industry, or even who are currently in the adult industry, that's no different from that principal saying, I've decided I'm going to fire this English teacher because she adopted a dog from the pound. And meanwhile, I'm going to fire this science teacher because they drink alcohol on the weekends. And I had a son who died in a DUI, and I feel bad about that. So they're fired arbitrarily. That's the issue. Now, there are states like Colorado, North Dakota, California, and New York that have state statutes that protect what they call lawful off-duty conduct. And this also applies to private employers. So in the sense to my earlier argument that it's an at-will employment situation, that's true, but not when it comes to protected classes like race,
of course,
religion, gender, race, etc. And I think that, in my view, which might be a little more progressive, is I think that lawful off-duty conduct or conduct within the law on your own time should actually be a protected class because so many people are adversely affected by employment decisions as a result of stuff that has nothing to do with their job based on the arbitrary morality of a certain administrator at the organization.
We've been speaking with Dave Pounder. The book is Obscene Thoughts, a pornographer's perspective on sex, love, and dating. Really great to have you on. Very interesting topic.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Lewis has brought us a couple of stories on the bonus show about a woman who was in love with a roller coaster or a train, and about people being enamored with inanimate objects. And we now have a really strange story about a guy from Washington State named Edward Smith. He's 63 years old, and he was on a TV morning show the other day, and he said that he had made love to over 700 vehicles, including Mustangs, luxury Jaguars, and even an attack helicopter, Lewis, which is incredible. Such an aggressive vehicle for him to be making love with. Smith made the admission on a British family TV show called This Morning, and he told the host that he was a mechaphile, someone who is sexually attracted to machines and prefers making love to motors more than women. He says he first did this when he was 14 with a Volkswagen Beetle, starting with a small vehicle, when he was tempted to give the vehicle what he described as a gentle caress. Let's hear from Edward Smith.
The neighbours next door had a VW Beetle. So when you were about 14, not to put too fine a point on it, that was your first experience of love with a car?
Other than like toy models and pictures and the standard young teenager growing up, developing their libido. I got tempted one night to just step outside and gently caress the car, and it did something for me. Kind of woke something up inside.
He also admitted that in October of 2013 that he was occasionally attempted to stray from making love to vehicles, but said, "I know better now than to pursue other people's private property without permission. I will not deny that I look at other cars on TV or at shows and still get those impulses and desires, but those were the early days. Now I want to settle down." It seems, Lewis, like sex with cars really drives this man wild.
Yes, very, very clever. That's a good one.
Could you say that an attractive convertible really gears him up?
I feel like we're in an Austin Powers movie now.
This is definitely a form of autoerotic stimulation, wouldn't you say?
Very good, Dave. This is an incredible story.
Seriously, though, what do you make of this? I mean, we had that interesting story.
I almost envy this guy, to be honest with you.
Really? Because you could have whoever you find to be most desirable if simply you can afford the car, I guess.
Yeah, you can just park something in your garage, but I don't know. You park a 454 big block engine, put it right in the middle of your garage and you're all set. You're
but Lewis, what about that thing, Greg wrote to us, and after the 3 breast parody story that we talked about on the bonus show, and said, listen, can't we just say whatever people's preferences are, whatever their quirks are, we don't evaluate whether they're mentally ill or just quirky or unusual or normal or whatever. We just say people can do whatever they want. I mean, does this story fall into that? Is it okay to say, listen, you've decided to make love to vehicles, something that didn't even exist more than 100 and something years ago. You lay down next to the vehicle, you get on top of the vehicle. Can we not make some kind of assessment about what is going on here? Not that I'd be the person to make it, but is it not okay to assess what is going on here? And let me also add, ladies and gentlemen, for all of the anti-gay bigots who insist that if we have same-sex marriage, people all of a sudden will be marrying their cars, this guy's been making love to vehicles since he was 14 years old, almost 50 years ago. He didn't need same-sex marriage to start taking cars for a ride, so to speak.
Hey, look, I'm sure mechaphiles have always existed, and maybe 200 years ago, they were getting busy with horse-drawn carriages. But other people aren't involved in this. He's doing it with his own property. I'm totally fine with this. I don't see a problem. Let him have fun, and I'm sure people are gonna point and stare and laugh. So maybe he shouldn't have said anything on national television. But you know what? It's fine.
All right, it's no secret that things haven't been going particularly well for Republican Governor Tom Corbett in Pennsylvania in his effort to woo voters to vote for him for re-election. And he now has been caught photoshopping in a black woman into a picture of him standing with supposed supporters, the picture we're displaying for you. And Andrew Kaczynski at BuzzFeed figured out that this is a stock photograph, which has actually been reversed. And it's actually a black woman speaking to her financial advisor. And the picture has been photoshopped, reversed, and added in to make it seem as though this woman is a supporter of Tom Corbett's. This is the funniest thing. Media went to the Tom Corbett campaign and they said, hey, Tom, or Tom's campaign, we figured out that this black woman is not really a supporter. Why did you Photoshop in a black woman? And they said, oh, no. All of the people in the picture that appear to be supporting Tom Corbett have been Photoshopped in. I mean, Louis, it's amazing. Your defense for Photoshopping in a black woman is the entire picture, all of the pictures on the website are not actual supporters of Tom Corbett. Well, I'm convinced.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll find a picture with an Asian, someone of Hispanic descent. The list goes on and on. But why stop there? Let's just start putting Ronald Reagan and Joseph Stalin and whoever you want to have in your pictures, shaking hands with you.
They literally have binders full of pictures of people who aren't actually supporters of Tom Corbett that they can Photoshop in. They're taking that Mitt Romney thing. I have binders full of women. He's got binders or at least computer folders full of anybody you need to Photoshop in. We have a voicemail number, 219-2DavidP. The Because America, Because Freedom theme of Patriot Mail is really starting to spread, Louis. Listen to this.
Hello, Jerome P. Jermock here. Just wanted to extend my thank you to the anonymous benefactor who subsidized my membership to the show. $30 is eminently affordable, and I do appreciate it. Once again, thanks, and keep doing the good work you do. Because America and because freedom.
That's right, Louis. Because America and because freedom. And that is certainly a theme in our upcoming Patriot Mail calendar. We're now waiting on the sample, by the way. The calendar has been completed. I'm very excited to see it. More information about that coming soon. One more voicemail for you here.
Just a word of encouragement, David. Your viewing audience consists of more than just young people. I'm a 73-year-old white male living in Napa, California, and keep up the good progressive voice and work.
Thank you. All right, well, Louis, I don't know if it's ever happened that we have a day with 2 positive voicemails, but it is the day today. I'm sure Louis is going to be marking it down on his Patriot Mail calendar, which we'll have more information about soon. On today's bonus show, a study about how men and women view art differently. Lockheed announces a big breakthrough in fusion energy, and much, much more. How do you get the bonus show? It's easy. You go to davidpakman.com/membership. You sign up. You can use Amazon payments. You can use PayPal. We have other payment methods as well. And you get access. And not only do you get the bonus show, you get a whole other long list of compelling and titillating member benefits. We will talk to you today on the bonus show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.